Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm Chris. I had to drop the quality to get you to stop glitching on me. All right, I've already said I'm Chris. I am. This is, I don't know if I've ever done this channel. This is History Rebels. I did subscribe when I saw interesting. I joined the channel when I saw they were doing, let me go back. I didn't tell you to start. They're doing an American Revolution series. So they're still going. But anyways, I thought, I like the American Revolution, so I'm going to cover it. Now, this is the Battle of Lexington and Concord, 1775. I did watch like the first, I watched the first minute. Yeah, I watched about here, just to kind of see what I was getting into. Should be good. Anyways, you click that thumbs up for me, that helps. And you can donate to the channel through the thanks button. Donate, request a video, and your name sponsors that video. Otherwise, subscribe to the channel. It's free. And YouTube pays you money. That's what they told me to tell you. That's a lie. Let's get into the video.
It's 1775, and the plains of North America have been thrust into war. From Lexington to Yorktown, brother will fight brother as the once loyal 13 colonies fight for the mother country or for liberty and a new era. This is the story of the American Revolution. Join us as we explore the key battles, the strategies, and the politics that will one day lead to the birth of a nation. Over 150 years before the Battle of Lexington and the shots that will start the American Revolution, Europeans first begin colonizing the Americas. They settle in places like Jamestown and Quebec, and by the 1750s, the colonies have transformed from precarious trading posts to vast and complicated settlements divided by the leading powers of Europe. The British colonists bring with them a democratic tradition and fundamental rights won over hundreds of years of warfare and rebellion. And with a high proportion of landowners, 60% of the male European population are eligible to vote, a far higher number compared to Britain. Most of the 13 colonies have appointed or elected royal governors who are nominally in charge, their power being checked by local representative assemblies and councils. The elected assemblies decide on issues from local tax to militia budgets, but new laws, including the levying of new taxes, are also issued from Parliament in London, who perceive their authority over the colonies as absolute.
I just wanted to go back, see if I was blocking anything. My fault.
As absolute. In 1756, the first truly global conflict erupts, the 7 Years' War, with North America becoming a key battleground between Great Britain and her old...
Give me a second. Okay, so I paused it. There's a book I have here called Crucible of War by Fred Anderson. It's the 7 Years' War and the Fate of Empire in British North America, 1754-1766. Really good book. Unfortunately, the book itself is 746 pages. And then if you take the notes, if you're one of those people who likes to read through the notes and all that stuff on the index, I do not. It's 862, but it's 746. Good book. Gets a little bogged down in details sometimes that just after a while you're like, okay. But it's if you're somebody who wants to read short chapters, that's what it is. Like it's 11, 12, 13 page chapters, sometimes 8, 16 here and there, a 14. But it's, if you're somebody who just wants to take like bites of the book, you know, just read a chapter a day, be done. I mean, look, some chapters are chapter 42, Murray ascends the St. Lawrence, from page 397 to 399. The next one is it's 10 pages. So if you're wanting to read it, it's a quick read. If you're going by chapters, it's a big book, so it's not a quick read. Obviously, it'll take you probably 2 months if you just do chapters. But interesting, just wanted to point that out. Somebody asked me about it before. So back to the video.
Old enemy, France. Both sides rely heavily on native allies. But colonial militias are also vital for the British in gaining an upper hand in the conflict, who now play a leading role in shaping their future on the continent. Although the British prevail and become the undisputed power in North America, they end the conflict financially ruined and increasingly expect the colonies to burden some of the financial costs of their defence. But because they see colonists as already represented in Parliament by virtue of being British subjects, they equally see no reason to consult the colonial governments directly on how to raise these funds. Many in Great Britain are angered by the idea of taxing British subjects without formal representation in Parliament, as many of the colonists desire. This includes Britain's wartime leader during the 7 Years' War, William Pitt, who tells the House of Commons in 1766, "It is my opinion that this kingdom has no right to lay a tax upon the colonies. It cannot continue a century. If it does not drop, it must be amputated." In the colonies, the levying of new taxes without consent is becoming a serious grievance. And although loyal to the king, George III, many colonists view their rights as Englishmen, including having a local, representative government, as being ignored by an out-of-touch and duplicitous parliament 3,000 miles away. After several failed attempts at raising revenue in the 1760s, anger and resistance begin to rise to Parliament's meddling throughout the colonies. In 1767, the government in London attempts to demonstrate its power through a series of laws known as the Townshend Acts, which it hopes will raise much-needed funds and crucially pave the way for future laws that will make the colonies financially self-sufficient. The plans backfire, and the Townshend Acts only pour fuel onto the fire. In Boston, riots break out, leading to the deployment of the regular army to protect local officials. Tensions boil over in the city, and an angry crowd provokes soldiers into firing. 5 colonists lay dead in what will soon become known as the Boston Massacre. Although the soldiers, known locally as regulars, are removed from Boston, tensions in the city remain high. 3 years later, to protest laws that undercut the price of smuggled tea, Bostonians dressed as Native Americans board East India Company ships and pour £9,000 of goods into the harbour. The British government's reaction is swift and severe. To send a message across the colonies, they introduce what will soon become known as the Intolerable Acts, which includes replacing self-governance in Massachusetts with direct British control. However, instead of discouraging further acts of rebellion, the Intolerable Acts lead to the First Continental Congress in October 1774. In the city of Philadelphia, delegates meet from across the colonies to discuss a united response. Those who desire independence, known as patriots, are still in the minority, as most representatives still do not want a break from the crown. But Parliament's arrogance must be confronted, and a resolution is made to boycott British goods until the intolerable acts are repealed. In Boston, more extreme measures are taken. The now disbanded Colonial Assembly forms the Massachusetts Provincial Congress and starts training a militia for war. Massachusetts is declared to be an open rebellion by the new British authorities, who occupy the city of Boston but little else. The scene is set for a showdown between Parliament and the colonies. British General Thomas Gage is dispatched to Boston to take command of the quickly deteriorating situation. He knows the land well, having fought the French in North America years earlier alongside colonists like George Washington. Although suppressing rebellions and fighting wars in different continents is nothing new to the British Army, few of Gage's 4,000 men have seen actual combat. The general quickly begins regular patrols across the countryside from his headquarters in Boston, in a show of force to the rebel Provincial Congress and to boost the morale of his own beleaguered forces. But General Gage does not want war, and he plans to prevent it by capturing or destroying military supplies in lightning raids across Massachusetts. These raids have limited success and mostly serve to help better organize the colonial militias, with many units now being designated as Minutemen, who are able to rapidly respond to British movements. Confrontations between British regulars and colonial forces remain bloodless, and where the forces do meet, they only trade insults, with the occasional fistfight breaking out. The regulars are used to seeing armed militia protests, which are a common feature of colonial life, where locals demonstrate their rights as Englishmen as opposed to threatening violence. In March 1775, however, the more radical Massachusetts Provincial Congress decides that any large British force leaving Boston is now to be opposed with armed resistance. At the same time,
I apologize for not really talking so much. Every different channel's interpretation of things is always a little different, and so I'm just enjoying the way that they're telling the story. Just kind of the lead up to it, I think, is awesome. But I really like it. So I'm more just enjoying the story over trying to add to anything to kind of interrupt the flow. So I do apologize if you're expecting more from me.
Gage receives his own escalatory orders from an intransigent government in London to disarm the colonial militias and imprison the ringleaders, setting the two sides on a collision course. Gage hatches a plan to capture the rebel leadership and large military stores in the nearby town of Concord. In one fast and secret expedition, he hopes to deal a fatal blow to the nascent colonial revolt. He prepares a small force of 700 men under Lieutenant Colonel Smith, giving him strict instructions to respect the rights of local inhabitants and their private property, but also to request reinforcements if resistance is met. But the Massachusetts rebels had been expecting such a move, and the evening before the raid, patriots catch wind of the plans in Boston and ride out to warn the Congress leadership and militias, narrowly avoiding British patrols. Because the land route to Concord is closely watched by rebel sympathizers, in the early hours of the 19th of April, Smith's force row across the bay in an attempt to maintain the element of surprise. They disembark into waist-deep water and by 2 a.m. begin their 18-mile march to Concord in soaking boots. Because no resistance is expected to speed up their movements, each soldier is carrying limited ammunition, a decision that would prove disastrous later in the day. As the British
Yeah, they were expecting the Americans to more just. Oh, hold on. They were expecting the Americans to more just not have big enough groups to kind of skirmish with them, and they really. I don't think they anticipated what happened at Lexington was what they expected to happen at Concord, which was the Lexington men got in line, and you could tell they were nervous. There's a really good movie from the '80s called April Morning. I never heard of it, just watched it. Man, it must have been around Thanksgiving. Anyways, really good. It's a slow movie, but there's a part in there when all the guys they get out front of Lexington and they're standing in this line and they're just going to um, present themselves to show the British, hey, look, okay, we're going to negotiate. Oh, come on, go away. There you go. We're going to negotiate, and they think they can talk to the British, and they have this kid as everyone's standing there, and it's maybe 20 people. They're all standing there, and give me a second. Okay, Tommy Lee Jones is in it. Robert, I can't say his name. Robert Urich. Seen his face, rip torn. But anyways, so they're standing there. This is it's one of the best. It's one of the best scenes in a movie in terms of like I felt it. So they're standing in this line, and they're waiting for the British, and there's a little kid there that asks if he can play like the flute or something like that. He starts playing the flute, and one of the guys there and this isn't like 100% accurate, but this is just it's a good story. One of the guys there starts giving this prayer to everybody, and they're kind of singing the prayer back, and they're having a good time, and they stop, and they're just like and in the distance you hear. You hear that drum from the British, the marching band, and the guys are just like, okay, everybody get in line, get ready, and they're just watching through this Bowling Green, through this trail that curves over, and we're gonna return. There you go, and it returns back like around, and there's some trees there and some other buildings, really, and you can hear it getting louder and louder and louder, but you can't see it. And then you start to hear horse hooves. And these horses come around, and these soldiers see these guys standing there. And by then, it hits the soldiers of, oh, okay, yep, this is the British Army we're looking at, isn't it? Oh, boy. And they're all like, don't worry, boys. Stay together. But everyone's looking at each other like, if you run, I run. Like, are you going? You staying? You going? Because if you go, I'm going. I'm not going to be a coward. But if we all run together, we don't look so cowardish. Cowardish? Cowardishly. We don't look stupid. Weak. Cowardish. But anyways, the British on the horses come up, and they see everybody, and they immediately... Thank you. They immediately get all of the soldiers, the British soldiers, get them all in lines. Come on, really? Get them all in lines. And the Americans then start looking at each other like, well, this isn't what we wanted. We wanted you to respect us and to negotiate. And the British on horseback comes up, and he's just like, you're all rebels right now. Scatter, or, we shoot. And they're just like, well, hold on. We just want to talk. And the guy just, with his horse, just leaves. Gets behind his line, and he's like, ready your weapons. And the Americans are just like, hold on, wait. And so the Americans are getting their weapons. And the whole time you're watching this, you're just kind of like, what would I do in this moment? I would run. I would have run. Because what you think is going to happen, the British are telling you it's not happening. You have a weapon and you are standing in line against us in a typical battle formation. Okay, this is what you want. This is what you get. And they open fire and everyone scatters. And it's just like, yeah. And one of the guys is like, I saw my father get hit and I couldn't make it there. I couldn't make it back to him. And he's just like, he's crushed because it got out of hand, they felt like. And then there was another guy, because to be fair, there was a shot fired. This shot heard around the world. And that shot happens, and no one knows where it is. But in the video, it was done by the Patriot side, by a guy in the woods. Possible? Who knows? And so the British just opened fire because they don't know who shot. And they just opened fire on that crowd. And it's such a great part. It's like a 7-minute build-up. And as I was watching it, you're just starting to feel like, oh, no, that's what it sounded like. To hear that band marching on. To know that you are so good at what you do of war, which is what England did. You're so good at war that you can have a marching band telling everyone, we're coming. Not only are we coming, we're going to win. So what do you want to do? Like, it just, and I know everyone kind of had bands, but there was one country that was kicking the ass of everyone else. And just being in that position, I felt it. I was like, oh boy, that is uncomfortable. It's a good movie. I don't know how accurate it is. It ends really kind of like, really? That's how we're going to end it? Okay.
March, colonial riders are spotted moving west ahead of the column. Smith then hears reports from his forward units that large militia forces are gathering at Lexington, unnerving news which quickly spreads throughout the ranks. Smith knows they've lost the element of surprise and sends word back to Boston asking for reinforcements. As British forces arrive in Lexington, the town's militia is present. As with previous confrontations, neither side expect bloodshed, and the militia of 80 men under the command of John Parker is purposefully not blocking the road to Concord or intending to fight regular troops. Parker tells his men, "Stand your ground, don't fire unless fired upon, but if they mean to have a war, let it begin here." Without orders, a British advance guard moves on to Lexington Common instead of marching past to Concord. Commanders on both sides tell their men not to fire, and the militia is told to disperse. 100 local spectators watch on curiously as the two forces casually hurl insults at each other. As the militiamen slowly begin to leave, a single shot rings out from somewhere on the surrounding common. In the immediate confusion, other shots start to be fired from both sides until the British company volley fires without orders. Although those on the field do not yet know it, the first blood has been spilt of the American Revolutionary War, and 8 militiamen lay dead on Lexington Common.
That was pretty much how it plays out in the movie. Obviously, they had less people. Couldn't pay all the extras. But, yeah, they were lined up, like, in the Bowling Green, but the roads went, like, around. So they were just kind of there, not blocking anything, but letting it be known that our presence is here, and we do want to talk. We don't want war. We're defending our land. We're defending our people. And that British line formed. And as soon as that formed, the Americans were kind of like, oh, okay, this isn't what we wanted. And the British are in their line kind of like, this isn't what we came for, but this is what we do. So they were less worried about what was going to happen next because they were going to fight this battle or not fight the battle, but they were going to be going on to what they had to do. What they were going to do was going to happen that day. It did not matter what the Americans or the patriots, the colonists, what they were going to do. The British looked at it like, you can be moved, killed, run away. We don't care. But yeah, that's exactly how it was. It was pretty good.
Smith regains control of the situation and berates his stunned officers, reminding them of Gage's orders. The troops are recalled and the march continues apace to Concord. The day is young, and Smith hopes they can still complete their mission despite the unwelcomed setback at Lexington. Upon arrival into Concord, the British search buildings where residents give them permission and burn the small amounts of contraband they can find. But there are no rebel leaders or large military stores, as anything and anyone of value has been dispersed hours earlier by the rebels. By 9 AM, 400 colonial militia have concentrated in the surrounding hills under the command of Colonel Barrett.
And a lot of them already had word of what had happened at Lexington. A lot of people from Lexington spread. Some of the people nearby heard the shots in the distance and instantly realized, oh, this is the British are out to kill. You know, not knowing what was happening. A lot of them weren't even sure that there was a group at Lexington. But a lot of those people from Lexington who fled made it sound like, oh, the British opened fire on us. We did nothing. We were just, playing harmonicas and singing Kumbaya, and they just came up and just gunned us down. We didn't have weapons. What are you talking about? What are you talking about? But I have one now, so I'm ready to go. Things change. Word of mouth can really change what someone did, because I'm dealing with something like that.
They have heard rumours of the events at Lexington and now see smoke coming from Concord. Assuming that the regulars are burning the town, many are surprised and angered by the apparent escalation, but they are not afraid to meet fire with fire. The exhausted British regulars resting in the town are still unaware of the dramatic change of sentiment or of the large numbers of militia that are slowly surrounding their position. Now watched on by the evacuated townspeople, Barrett and the militia resolve to save the town, and they advance. Barrett's force quickly rout the 90 regulars holding the bridge, but lightly stunned by both the escalation and their success, they fall back to the hill and regroup. There are now over 1,000 militia surrounding Concord, and Smith knows it is time to leave. The regulars spread out beyond the road for protection and start the march back towards Lexington. But columns of militia are ominously shadowing their movements, and a race begins to the first bridge. The situation has now seriously changed for Smith and his men, who were perilously outnumbered and far away from the safety of Boston Harbor. Shots start to ring out, and the regulars take casualties as they cross the bridge. British skirmishers attempt to flank the militia, who position themselves well behind walls, trees, and undergrowth. Those they catch are killed, but most of the militiamen have spent years fighting and living in the rugged terrain of North America and delivered disciplined and effective musket fire before moving position. As the speed of march increases in sheer desperation, the regulars are repeatedly ambushed by the now over 2,000 strong militia. Casualties are starting to mount as the British tactical formations are no use in the wooded countryside, and what little ammunition they have starts to run low. They spread out where they can, but at narrow passes, like at the now infamous Bloody Angle, discipline and cohesion starts to break down as the force fights for its life. The Lexington militia under Parker, who was scattered by the British just 8 hours earlier, are now back and ready for revenge. Parker prepares his men well in a wooded hill overlooking the road. As they open fire, the British commander, Lieutenant Colonel Smith, is hit in the leg and falls from his horse wounded. Desperate fighting continues up to a last ambush outside of Lexington, where the British, now exhausted from 14 hours of marching and fighting, are on the verge of surrender. Smith and his men stagger into town, defeated by their superior tactics, tenacity, and the sheer numbers of colonial militia. But just as all hope seems lost, cheers erupt in the British ranks. Smith's message for reinforcements has been answered. Under the command of Earl Percy, 1,000 British regulars are now surrounding Lexington with 2 field guns. Percy, taking overall command, reorganises Smith's battered force and rests them in the town. But the battle is not over, and although reinforced, the British are still hopelessly outnumbered by the now 4,000 strong colonial militia, who show no signs of being cowed by the presence of British reinforcements. Percy soon continues the march, with Smith's battered formation in the middle of the column. A militia general, William Heath, arrives to take overall command of the colonial forces. He orders the militia to now avoid large British formations because of the threat posed by the deadly field guns. Heath's forces must continually rotate to engage the British along the road, a time-consuming and difficult manoeuvre to carry out. Desperate street fighting and bloody hand-to-hand combat occurs as the British column enters the town of Monotony. Some atrocities are committed by the desperate and frightened British troops, as each building is cleared of sharpshooters. Many are killed on both sides in Monotony, including one militiaman who dies fighting from his home, telling his comrades, "An Englishman's home is his castle." The militia has large forces organised and waiting at Cambridge, but Percy decides instead to march towards Charlestown, rightfully cautious of a trap. As the final hill is cleared of militia, the British column limps into Charlestown, to the safety of Boston Harbour and Royal Navy guns. The first battle of the American Revolution is over, and although it saw relatively minor casualties on both sides, the battle is nonetheless monumental. The war has now begun, and as the Patriot leader, John Adams, later writes, "The die is cast, and the Rubicon crossed." In the aftermath of the battle, and in what must have felt like the world turning upside down, trenches and redouts are dug around the city, and Boston is put to siege. In the days and weeks following the battle, volunteers from all over the 13 colonies march to join the army, and the militia transforms into a truly American force for the first time. Although they may lack the equipment and the professionalism of a modern army, they have nonetheless succeeded in their first test of what will soon become a grueling war. General Gage's strategy to prevent conflict has dramatically failed, along with the British government's plan to force colonial compliance without the consent of its people. In London, Parliament quickly blames Gage for recklessly starting a civil conflict, despite the fact he was following their orders. And even as the shots at Lexington are heard around the world, Parliament's position will not budge, and British reinforcements are soon dispatched to the colonies. What started out as civil and legal arguments over rights and taxation has now transformed into outright war in Massachusetts. The opening battle has ended in colonial victory, but the battle at Lexington is just the beginning, and the British will soon strike back. Thank you for watching our series on the American Revolution.
That was good. I like that. I'll definitely cover more from this channel for sure. Yeah, this is one of those channels I saw. It was a different one of these. Might have been this one. I saw that and I was like, oh. And then I kind of looked through and I realized, oh, they're covering a lot of them. This is what I saw. So it's like a yeah. It's like a guy giving a like a TED Talk kind of thing. But anyways, I hope you like it. I did, and I'm definitely going to be covering more of them. So you're either going to enjoy that or you won't. But I love this stuff, so yes, I will cover it. All right, well, until the next one, have a good day, have a good night.